Welcome back, everybody. Today, we're going to be diving into a 1976 cold case that
Wow.
really shook a small town in New Jersey,
Okay.
the murder of Kim Montilo.
Right.
And you know what makes this case really fascinating is this possible sighting of her car near the crime scene
Mm,
before anyone even knew she was missing.
that's interesting.
It's kind of like one of those
Yeah.
what-if elements.
Yeah, it adds a whole layer of what ifs to the story.
Yeah.
And it really makes you think
Right.
about how these seemingly insignificant events
Right.
could potentially have huge consequences.
Exactly. And this was 1976.
Right.
No cell phones,
Yeah.
limited forensic technology, so investigators were really up against it.
Yeah, they were really relying on good old-fashioned police work.
Right. So let's start by painting a picture of Kim.
Okay.
She was a 20-year-old college student studying to be a lawyer.
Wow.
Had a really close-knit family,
Yeah.
bright future ahead of her. And it's just a stark contrast to the brutality of her murder.
Absolutely. And that contrast is something that often hits home in cases like this.
Yeah.
It reminds us that these kinds of tragedies can happen to anyone,
Right.
anywhere.
Yeah.
It shatters the sense of security
Yeah.
we often take for granted.
Okay, so let's talk about the crime scene.
Okay.
Kim was found in this really remote area in the woods near a swim club.
Oh, wow.
She had been stabbed multiple times,
Oh, my God.
and her throat was slit.
That's awful.
It was a really brutal scene, and investigators were initially faced with very few leads.
So the remoteness of the location definitely adds a layer of complexity
Oh,
to the
yeah.
investigation.
For sure.
It limits the potential for witnesses.
Yeah.
Makes securing the scene that much more challenging.
All right.
Not to mention, with limited resources and technology in 1976,
Right.
investigators were really heavily reliant on traditional methods,
Yeah.
like meticulous evidence collection, witness interviews.
Yeah. It's mind-boggling to think about how much forensic science
I
has
know.
advanced since then.
It's incredible.
Now, one of the first major discoveries in the investigation was Kim's car.
Okay.
It was found abandoned at the local mall, windows down, keys in the ignition.
Oh.
It immediately raised some red flags.
Yeah, that just screams something's wrong.
Right.
Leaving your car like that, especially back then, was incredibly unusual.
Right.
It suggests that something happened that forced Kim to abandon her car.
Right.
And it definitely wouldn't have been her choice.
Exactly. And here's where that what-if element comes into play.
Okay.
A young patrol officer named Randy Chucko, who later became chief of police,
Wow.
reported seeing a car matching Kim's description
Okay.
parked near the swim club earlier that same day.
Oh, wow. The timing of this potential sighting is crucial.
Right.
If it was indeed Kim's car,
Yeah.
it places her at the crime scene hours before she was reported missing.
Right.
This raises some very difficult questions, particularly for Officer Chucko,
Right.
who had to live with that knowledge that he might have seen the victim's car
Oh, yeah.
at the crime scene,
Yeah.
but was called away to another incident.
Talk about a heavy burden to carry.
Yeah, a huge burden to carry.
But back then, without immediate access to databases and communication tools,
Right.
there was no way for him to know
Right.
the potential significance of that sighting.
Yeah, it's a haunting reminder of how circumstances and limited resources
Right.
can impact even the most well-intentioned actions.
Absolutely. It makes you wonder how many other cases might have had different outcomes
Yeah,
with the technology we have today.
for sure. But it's important to acknowledge that even with all our modern advancements,
Right.
there are still elements of chance and the unknown that can impact an investigation.
That's very true. Now, while Officer Chucko was grappling with that potential sighting,
Yeah.
investigators were back at the mall gathering witness statements. And several people reported seeing a suspicious young man lurking around the parking lot.
Oh, really? So it's interesting how these seemingly unrelated observations
Right.
can become crucial pieces of the puzzle in an investigation.
Yeah.
This emphasizes the importance of thoroughness,
Right.
of gathering as much information as possible, even if it seems trivial at the time.
Right.
You never know what detail might lead to a breakthrough.
Absolutely. It's like trying to piece together this giant jigsaw puzzle.
Exactly.
Every little piece of information, no matter how small,
Yeah,
could be the key to solving the case.
exactly. And in this case, the witnesses described this young man as short,
Okay.
muscular, and acting strangely,
Yeah.
like asking women for directions
Okay.
or making unwanted advances.
Oh, wow.
Not enough for a positive ID, but definitely enough to raise concern.
Yeah, definitely not the kind of behavior you want to see in a mall parking lot.
Right.
Especially considering what happened to Kim.
Yeah, for sure.
It adds another layer of unease to the whole situation. So at this point, investigators are dealing with a potential suspect sighting at the mall,
Right.
the possibility of Kim's car being spotted at the crime scene before she was even reported missing,
Yeah.
and very few tangible leads.
Yeah.
It was a challenging situation, to say the least.
It was, but there's this fascinating turn of events
Okay.
when investigators decide to revisit the pond
Okay.
near where Kim's body was discovered. Remember, they had already searched it multiple times, but they went back to that pond.
They went back to that pond.
Yeah.
I'm guessing something changed that made them want to search it again.
You got it. The water level had receded significantly since the initial searches.
Okay.
And this time something caught their eye.
Okay.
Sticking out of the mud was the murder weapon,
Oh,
a
wow.
hunting knife.
Talk about a breakthrough.
Absolutely.
Finding that murder weapon must have been a huge relief for investigators.
It was huge.
It finally gave them something concrete to work with.
I gave them something to go on.
So what did they do with the knife? I'm assuming they tried to trace it back to the killer.
Exactly. They started by contacting sporting goods stores in the area,
Okay.
showing them pictures of the knife and asking if they recognized it.
Okay.
It was a long shot, but sometimes the simplest methods can be surprisingly effective.
It's like old-fashioned detective work, right?
Exactly.
Knocking on doors, talking to people, following every lead.
Precisely. And in this case, their efforts paid off.
They did.
The owner of a sporting goods store in a nearby town recognized the knife.
Oh, wow.
He remembered selling it to a young man just days before Kim's murder.
Okay, so now they have a possible link between the murder weapon and a potential suspect.
Right?
Did the store owner remember anything about the guy who bought the knife?
He did, and his description was much more detailed than the ones from the mall.
Oh, really?
He described the young man as being short, muscular, with long hair
Okay.
and these distinctive homemade tattoos.
Okay.
And suddenly those vague descriptions from the mall witnesses started to seem much more significant.
It's like those puzzle pieces we were talking about earlier starting to fall into place.
Yeah,
Did this more detailed description lead investigators to a specific suspect?
it did. A detective in a neighboring town immediately recognized the description.
Oh, wow.
It matched a 16-year-old named Christopher Regetti,
Okay.
who already had a history of violence against women.
Whoa, so they already had someone on their radar who fit the description
They did.
and had a history of violence.
And a history.
That must have been a major turning point in the case.
Yeah, a crucial development.
Yeah,
While past offenses can't be used as direct evidence of guilt,
right.
they can certainly inform an investigator's approach and sense of urgency.
Okay.
In this case, Regetti's prior history raised the stakes considerably.
It makes sense in a small town where violent crime was rare.
Right.
Regetti would have stood out, especially with this history.
Absolutely.
So what happened next? Did they bring Regetti in for questioning?
They did. At first, Regetti denied any involvement in Kim's murder. He claimed he was nowhere near the crime scene and even offered an alibi, saying he was with friends at the time.
Oh, so standard procedure, I guess, deny everything and hope it goes away.
Right.
But I'm guessing his alibi didn't hold up under scrutiny.
You're right.
Hmm.
Investigators contacted Regetti's friends,
Okay.
and they admitted that he had fabricated the whole alibi.
Oh, wow.
He wasn't with them at the time of the murder.
That's a pretty big blow to his credibility.
It is.
It makes his denial seem a lot less convincing. Did this change his story at all?
It did. Faced with mounting evidence,
Yeah.
Regetti changed his tune.
Okay.
This time he admitted to being at the mall and even encountering Kim,
Okay.
but he claimed that she was the one who initiated the attack.
Interesting.
He said he was acting in self-defense.
The self-defense claim.
Right.
It's a classic defense strategy.
It is.
But in this case, it seems pretty far-fetched.
Yeah.
A young college student randomly attacking a guy with a knife.
It's a claim that always requires careful scrutiny. Investigators have to consider the circumstances, the evidence at the scene, and the credibility of everyone involved.
Right.
In Regetti's case, there were several factors
Okay.
that made his self-defense claim seem highly unlikely.
Like what kind of evidence contradicted his story?
Well, for starters, remember that girl who saw him with a similar knife at the mall?
Yeah.
She was a friend of Regetti's
Okay.
and had even asked him to cut a piece of yarn for her using that knife.
Oh, so he had the murder weapon on him at the mall.
Right.
Which directly contradicts his claim that Kim attacked him first.
Right.
That's pretty damning evidence.
It is. It places the knife in his possession at the mall on the day of the murder.
Right.
Casting serious doubt on his self-defense claim.
Wow.
And there's another piece of evidence that really sealed the deal.
Oh, there's more. What else did they find?
While Regetti was serving time for a previous offense,
Okay.
he bragged to another inmate about never leaving a witness again.
Wow. That's a chilling statement.
It is.
It suggests that he was planning to kill someone.
Right.
And had no intention of letting anyone survive to identify him.
Exactly.
It paints a very disturbing picture of his mindset.
It transforms the crime from a potentially impulsive act
Right?
to a calculated, cold-blooded murder.
Wow.
And this statement, coupled with all the other evidence,
Right.
made Regetti's self-defense claim practically impossible to believe.
So with all this evidence stacked against him, what happened next? Was he arrested and put on trial?
Regetti was arrested and charged with the murder of Kim Montilo.
Okay.
The trial was a tense affair with the prosecution meticulously laying out their case
Uh-huh.
and the defense trying to poke holes in their arguments.
Right.
But in the end, the evidence was simply too overwhelming.
I'm guessing the jury didn't buy his self-defense claim either.
They didn't. Based on the evidence presented,
Yeah.
the jury found Christopher Regetti guilty of murder.
It must have been a bittersweet victory for Kim's family.
I imagine so.
Justice was served, but it couldn't bring her back. And what about Regetti? What was his sentence?
He was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole.
Life in prison, but with the possibility of parole.
Yes.
So Kim's family has had to live with the knowledge that her killer might one day walk free.
Sadly.
Yes.
And it's a burden that many families of murder victims have to carry.
Right.
The trauma of the crime doesn't end with a conviction.
Yeah.
It continues, especially in cases involving parole hearings.
That's heartbreaking. To have to relive the pain and fear every time their loved one's killer comes up for parole.
Exactly.
It's an added layer of suffering that no one should have to endure.
Absolutely.
What about Officer Chucko? Did he ever find peace with that potential sighting?
It's hard to say for sure,
Yeah.
but I imagine it weighed heavily on him throughout his career.
Yeah.
The thought that he might have been able to prevent Kim's death,
Right.
if circumstances had been different, is a haunting burden to carry.
It is.
It highlights the psychological toll
Yeah.
that these kinds of cases can take on law enforcement officers.
Mhm. It's a reminder that behind every investigation, behind every case file, there are real people
Right.
whose lives are forever changed by these events.
Absolutely.
The victims, their families, the investigators who dedicate themselves to seeking justice, they all carry the weight of these tragedies in different ways.
It's an important perspective to remember,
Yeah.
and it speaks to the broader impact of crime,
Right.
an impact that extends far beyond the courtroom and the headlines.
Well said.
Yeah.
Now, before we wrap up this deep dive into the Kim Montilo case,
Okay.
I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier.
Right.
The role of technology in criminal investigations.
It's a fascinating aspect to consider.
It is.
Comparing the investigative techniques used in 1976 to the tools we have today
Right.
highlights how much forensic science has evolved.
Back then, investigators had to rely on shoe leather detective work,
Yeah.
meticulous evidence collection, and painstaking interviews.
Uh-huh.
Today, we have DNA analysis, advanced fingerprinting techniques, facial recognition software,
I know, it's amazing.
and a vast network of databases that can connect seemingly unrelated pieces of information
Right.
in an instant. It's a whole different world. It makes you wonder how this case might have played out differently, you know?
Oh, yeah.
If investigators had access to those tools back then,
Right.
would they have been able to connect Regetti to the crime sooner?
Yeah.
Would Kim still be alive?
It's impossible to say for sure,
Right.
but it certainly raises some intriguing questions.
Yeah.
Imagine if they had DNA evidence from the knife sheath
Right.
found at the scene,
Right.
or if they could have used facial recognition software
Right.
to identify Regetti from the witness descriptions.
Yeah.
It could have significantly expedited the investigation.
It's a reminder of how technology can be a powerful tool for justice.
It is.
But it also makes you think about the cases that happened before these advancements,
Right.
the ones that might have gone unsolved, or where the wrong person was convicted.
That's a sobering thought. And it underscores the importance of ongoing efforts to revisit cold cases
Right.
using modern technology.
Yeah.
There are countless families out there still searching for answers,
Yeah.
still hoping for justice.
Absolutely. And it speaks to the fact that even with all of our advancements,
Yeah.
there's always room for improvement in the pursuit of justice.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Now, going back to the Kim Montilo case,
Uh-huh.
it's worth noting that even in 1976,
Yeah.
investigators were able to secure a conviction
Right.
without relying on DNA evidence or sophisticated technology.
Right. Yeah.
It speaks to their dedication, their meticulous approach,
Mm-hmm.
and their ability to connect the dots
Right.
using traditional investigative methods.
It's a testament to the power of good old-fashioned detective work.
It is.
They relied on witness interviews, careful evidence collection,
Yeah.
and a thorough understanding of human behavior to build their case.
Exactly. And that element of human intuition,
Yeah.
that ability to read people and situations, is still essential in modern investigations,
Yeah.
even with all the technology at our disposal.
It's a reminder that technology can enhance and support human expertise,
Right.
but it can't replace it entirely.
Right.
There's still a need for skilled investigators who can analyze evidence,
Yeah.
interview witnesses, and piece together the puzzle of a crime.
Well said. And it's those investigators, those unsung heroes,
Yeah.
who often carry the weight of these cases long after the headlines fade.
Right.
They're the ones who see the darkest sides of humanity,
Yeah.
who deal with the trauma and grief, who dedicate their lives to seeking justice for the victims.
And in cases like this where the perpetrator is eligible for parole,
Right.
that burden can be even heavier.
Absolutely.
Imagine being Officer Chucko,
Right.
knowing that the man convicted of killing Kim Montelo
Yeah.
might one day walk free. It's a haunting thought.
It is. And it underscores the complexities of the justice system,
Yeah.
the delicate balance between punishment and rehabilitation, and the ongoing impact of these crimes
Yes.
on everyone involved.
It's a lot to process.
It is.
And it leaves us with some important questions to ponder.
Yeah.
Questions about the role of technology in law enforcement, the ethical considerations surrounding parole hearings,
Right.
and the lasting impact of violent crime on individuals and communities.
Those are questions that deserve thoughtful consideration and open dialogue.
They do.
And I think this deep dive into the Kim Montilo case
Yeah.
has provided a valuable framework for those discussions.
It certainly has. It's been a chilling reminder of the fragility of life,
Right.
the enduring consequences of violence, and the importance of seeking justice
Yeah.
for those who've been harmed.
Well said. And it's a story that stays with you long after you've heard it,
Yeah,
prompting reflection and perhaps even inspiring action.
absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Okay.
we encourage you to continue exploring these issues, to engage in meaningful conversations, and to remember the victims whose lives were cut short by these senseless acts of violence.
And if there's one takeaway from this case,
Mm,
it's this.
yeah,
No matter how much time passes,
right.
no matter how much technology advances,
Mm.
the pursuit of justice remains a vital and deeply human endeavor.
Beautifully put. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Kim Montilo case.
You're welcome.
We hope you found it informative, thought-provoking, and
Yeah.
perhaps even a little bit inspiring.
Absolutely.
Until next time, stay curious and keep diving deep.